I think we've got a good, strong economy. We've got very strong domestic demand. Consumers are holding up. Some low-income consumers are perhaps exhausting their buffers of saving that they built up during the pandemic. We're seeing a little bit more distress at the household level there. But generally, households are in very good financial shape. Our financial system is generally quite strong.
Man, that's great news. Now, I haven't actually heard that from many of the people I talk to in my normal life, but I guess households are doing good and everything's fine. So I don't even know why we're even bothering talking to Peter here. Maybe he has a different view of things. Joining me now, Peter Schiff, Chief Economist and Global Strategist at Euro-Pacific Asset Management. Peter, maybe we should just hang up now. I had no idea things were going so well. I thought grocery prices were up 40% and the housing market is about to have a commercial real estate issue, to put it mildly, but maybe I was wrong.
Well, remember, Janet Yellen's job is not to tell the public the truth. It's, to lie. It's to make the public believe that the economy is in much better shape than it really is. That her job is to help reelect her boss. So that's why she's there. So, don't expect an honest assessment to come out of Janet Yellen. That's the last thing she's going to do. Right? She wasn't hired to be honest. She was hired to lie and put a positive spin on all the bad news. Right? She makes lemonade out of lemons. And we've got one hell of a lemon of an economy, and she's making a lot of lemonade.
Peter, how bad is it and how bad is it going to get? Obviously, we talked about the economic numbers came out last week. A lot of people using the S word, stagflation. Is that where we're at? Is it getting worse? What's happening?
The economy is bad, and unfortunately, it's going to get a lot worse. The numbers don't tell the whole story. Most of the numbers are going to be revised anyway, so they're not even accurate. But there are some statistics that really paint a bleak picture. You've got a situation where savings rates are near record lows, household debt record high, credit card debt record high. Why are households in so much debt? Because the cost of living has gone up 30 or 40% just since Biden's been president. And so they're struggling to pay the bills, so they have to go into debt. The other way they're struggling is by taking second and third jobs. The number of Americans who are now moonlighting is at an all-time record high. All the jobs that have been created during the Biden presidency have gone to people who already had jobs, pretty much. They're all part-time jobs, and people are working 2 and 3 jobs. And then Biden claims credit for these jobs. The voters are blaming him for these jobs. They don't want these jobs. They wanted one job. But unfortunately, one paycheck doesn't cut it anymore because inflation has destroyed its value. So the economy is, in fact, a disaster. The entire banking system is insolvent. It's just pretending to be solvent because of phony accounting. If they actually had a mark to market all the loans on their books, they'd all be broke, including all the too big to fail banks. The U.S. itself is insolvent. We're spending now $1.1 trillion a year on interest. That's more than we spend on national defense. By next year, we'll be spending $2 trillion a year on interest. That'll be more than either Social Security or Medicare. It'll be the single biggest line item in the government budget, and it's not going to stop there. It's going to keep on growing. We have $35 trillion almost in the national debt, and that's growing exponentially. So we're on the verge of a major sovereign debt and currency crisis. Yet, Janet Yellen, is putting lipstick on this pig and trying to sell it to the voters.
Peter, I was talking to somebody last week about the economy, and he was actually going through exactly what you just talked about. He had to get a second job. He was having a hard time paying the bills. And he was asking me, hey, are we going to come out of it? Or are we going to run into some big bubble popping thing? And what I tried to explain to him, and please correct me if I explain it wrong, is that you're in the middle of the bubble popping thing. That it's not going to be some event. As you watch your standard of living go down, it's just going to keep going down. This is what it looks like. He's like, what's it look like? I said, congratulations, you're in the middle of it. Did I steer him wrong?
This is what it looks like now. It's going to look a lot worse as it proceeds to unfold. So we're in the crisis, but we're in the early stages of the crisis.
Okay, so when we hit things like $2 trillion in debt next year as just the interest on debt, just to service the debt, $2 trillion. Eventually, somebody is not going to get paid on our interest-only loan, whether that's China, Japan, whoever it may be. So what happens from there, Peter? How does it look when that conversation comes, because it's coming?
Yeah, well, you can already see that people are getting worried. They're moving out of dollars. That's why gold went over $2,400 an ounce. That's not a coincidence. There is a de-dollarization process that is starting. It's going to snowball. But as it really gets out of control, and when we start to see the dollar not just fall, domestically relative to prices or relative to gold, but when we finally see the dollar weakening against other sovereign fiat currencies like the euro, the pound, or even the yen, which has been under a lot of pressure, then you're going to see the inflation really start to accelerate. It's going to put much more upward pressure on long-term interest rates, and that's when it's really going to hit the fan. And that's when I think the government might end up with wage and price controls or some type of way to disguise the symptoms of inflation while allowing the disease to get much worse. And then you end up with shortages, long lines, rationing, riots, who knows? But the economic landscape is going to get a lot darker, probably especially after the elections.
Why after the elections?
Well, I think they might be able to kick the can down the road between now and then. Now, maybe not. Maybe it'll blow up. But they're going to try to do whatever they can. But once there's an election, it's not as imminent. Like you have to do it, because right now it's like we got to get through this election. We can't let the voters know how bad it is before they get into the polls. Now, they may not be able to keep the wolves at bay that long. We'll see.
There's nobody more at fault for the condition of this country than red state GOP voters. The reddest states in this country give us the most putrid Republicans at the federal level. Susan Collins is understandable, Tucker. Sorry to get all fired up. It's understandable. She's from Maine. It's from a blue state. Of course, we're going to get some wishy-washy, mealy-mouthed dork from that kind of state. For the Dakotas? The Dakotas are so red, it's crazy. They could have somebody to the right of me if they wanted to, but they don't. Well, I saw him on Fox last night. Oh, just gag me with a fork.
Well, apparently Rick was watching when I was doing that whole thing. He got all fired up about it, understandably. Rick Becker joins us now. I have a lot of respect for this guy. Candidate for North Dakota's at-large congressional district. You want to change D.C., this is how. And again, it's friggin' North Dakota. It's a former North Dakota state rep. It's not like he doesn't have a record. I love the Dakotas. I used to go pheasant hunting there all the time when I was a kid. Joining me now, Rick Becker. Rick, I'll never get it. And I don't mean to toss bombs at North Dakota, my own state, Texas. We have losers like John Cornyn. It's Wyoming. Wyoming's Republican Party sucks. Nebraska, Louisiana. Why?
Well, Jesse, thanks for having me on. So here's the thing. I think it's not so much about the voter, but it's about the party apparatus. So when you have a conservative state and they're electing more and more Republicans, they get to a point where if someone has a desire to have an elected position, right, if they're aspiring to have that, they know they must have an R behind their name or they're not going to get elected. So you have people then that don't have the conservative principles, but they have the spots. And so the way I see it is the more the greater the margin that the Republicans have in the legislature, in the elected officials, the more likely they are going to send a moderate squish to DC. And the reason for that is because you've got this paradox that when you have all of these moderates, when people are getting elected without conservative principles, you've then diluted the party to not have the principles it's supposed to have. They're more interested in protecting the club they're in, this party. Principle is far less important. The party then it's incumbent upon the party to send the people that represent the party, the moderate squish. And so here we are as grassroots principled conservatives fighting against the uniparty, against the big spending, big government RINO Republicans.
Rick, I need you to explain it to me as a former state rep and now somebody running as the at-large candidate, because I went through this when I ran for Congress too. Why is it that GOP leadership, whether you're in a state party or the national party, leadership moves to the middle. And I understand what you're saying about how a red state can get more moderate. I do. But why is it just automatically built in that the further you go up to the top, the more towards the middle you go? How is there nobody up there where you are? How?
Well, it's a fight. It's a never-ending fight. It's been going on for decades. The way I see it is that these leaders, they think that they're supposed to encompass everyone who's within the party. They put the party above principle. They need to focus not on just the number of seats with an R. They need to focus on forwarding fiscal policy that represents the platform, the principles of the Republican Party. They're not doing that. They're trying to be big tent. They're trying to play happy to everyone. And what they should be focused on is principle. And so, yes, we as conservatives in the Republican Party are disappointed and let down time and time and time again.
Rick, tell me about your race. Tell me about why you're running. What are your hot button issues? Tell people about yourself.
Yeah. Well, my race, this race for the House in North Dakota it's a perfect example of what you're talking about, Jesse. So I'm a plastic surgeon, a businessman. I was in the state legislature for 10 years as a grassroots conservative. I started North Dakota's version of the Freedom Caucus, called it the Bastiat Caucus. Was able to introduce and pass significant, important legislation like constitutional carry, the Second Amendment Preservation Act, confidential informant reform, civil asset forfeiture reform requiring search warrants for drone surveillance, requiring state agencies to include the ramifications of taking federal money. Huge, huge things. It's this type of track record for how I was able to get the endorsements of Senator Rand Paul, Representative Thomas Massey, Representative Bob Good, Vivek Ramaswamy, at least 8, 10, 12 members of the House Freedom Caucus. Now, you contrast that to the primary opponent I have, who is a career politician in the sense that she was a political staffer and then a lobbyist, and then she was appointed as a public utilities regulator, someone who actually in North Dakota is a proponent of renewables, despite the fact that we are reliant on fossil fuel. And she was selected by Mitt Romney to run his campaign in North Dakota. Here's where the war is. This is the fight. You've got a solid, grassroots, principled conservative against the uniparty RINO machine. I ask, Jesse, what do you think? This is exactly the race. Who do you think is going to represent North Dakota the best?
Backed by Rand Paul, Bob Good, and Thomas Massey should be about enough. That should be about enough for everybody. Those are about the only 3 politicians we even allow on this show. Real quick, Rick, give out your website so people can support you, please.
Yes, Rick Becker 2024, rickbecker2024.com. Please take a look. I'd love the support. We got to get more fighters to DC if we're going to save this country, Jesse.
rickbecker2024.com. Just so everybody knows. Thank you, Rick. I appreciate it. Just so everybody knows, that race, that primary, is significantly more important than the general election in November. You know that, right? Well, let's talk to Chip about this disastrous bill that I'm sure will be used against you, me, and everyone else, but everyone can pretend like it's fighting anti-Semitism today. Joining me now, Congressman Chip Roy from the great state of Texas. Chip, you're one of the few, once again, who voted against this pile of crap. Why'd you vote against it, Chip? Do you hate Jews?
Jesse, look, this is the thing, and let's back up for a minute. We ended up in this stupid political cul-de-sac because Republican so-called leadership chose to. That's what happened, right? Back up and rewind the clock 10 days ago. I had to vote against a massive foreign aid funding bill because, as you know, and as your listeners and viewers know, it was funding Ukraine for a missionless war when we don't have our own border secure. It was funding Israel, which I generally support doing and has supported doing in the past, but it was unpaid for, but importantly had $9 billion for Hamas and refugees. We'll come back to that in a minute. But I had to vote against that. So I had to spend the last week going and explaining to my dear friends, my Jewish constituents, a lot of my Christian constituents who are very pro-Israel, why did I vote against Israel? Because the geniuses of the Republican leadership put us in that position by putting a bad bill forward. So fast forward, they did it again. They put a bill on the floor that didn't go through Judiciary Committee, didn't get a chance to amend it, didn't have a hearing, then in so doing, labeling an anti-Semitism bill, They got everybody spun up that this was really important to go win the arguments in this craziness on the college campuses. And then they jammed it through, and it had a reference to an international organization's definition of anti-Semitism, which then included an entire laundry list of examples, which are another way of saying thought police. And yes, I know the Trump administration adopted it in some State Department thing, and some states have adopted it. But that doesn't mean I should adopt it. It doesn't mean I should codify it as a member of Congress. And frankly, we should review it. We shouldn't do thought police crap. Why do we play the games of the Democrat? Go kick them in the junk, kick their butts, and take our country back instead of playing their game.
Can you explain, because obviously I'm dead set against it, but there is all kinds of information and misinformation, people love that word today, out there about it. You're the one in Congress. You voted no. What's in it? What does it actually do? What do we have here?
Okay. The bill's purpose is to define anti-Semitism, to attach to as a rule of construction, so that when the Department of Education, the bureaucrats at the Department of Education, are going out to apply the Civil Rights Act, Title VI of the Civil Rights Act, to apply it to the funds that go to universities to make sure they're not discriminating, which of course in the past historically is generally designed since 1964 to apply to race. Obviously, there are other groups that it applies to, but you start raising very serious constitutional questions on both free speech, but also expression of religion and your religious views. Those things are getting targeted because you've got this laundry list of examples that go into historical context, things that you say, things you might do, and it's a whole list of things you can do or think and say that will get you in trouble as being anti-Semitic. Now, look, I looked at the list. If you looked at the list, you would agree most of that stuff is horrific, stupid crap to say. But when you start getting into empowering the federal government, bureaucrats, to go come in and say that because you said these things or thought these things, that somehow then your actions, which might be horrific actions, that somehow is something they get to determine is driven by anti-Semitism, that to me is where you're getting afoul of things. We should do what Ben Sass did in the University of Florida, what Jay Hartzell, the president of the University of Texas, did, which said, knock this crap off. You're not going to have encampments. You're not going to block people's access to schools. If you violate our rules, you're going to be kicked out of the university. You won't be able to graduate, and knock it all off. You can go give your free speech crap and say your weird pro-Palestinian, anti-Israel crap over there and say it all you want. But you're not going to jam everything up, and you're not going to hurt anybody. You're not going to attack anybody. That's what you do. You don't need the federal government coming in and dropping a stupid bill that's going to then create thought crimes, hate crimes, and create thought police for the entire country.
What does this empower the federal government to do when it obviously passes? Everyone and their brother knows this thing's sailing right through. Are we talking about the FBI showing up at my door if I wake up tomorrow morning and decide I hate Jews all of a sudden and I start spouting out a bunch of stupid stuff? Do I have to worry about the Federal Bureau of Investigation coming to visit me? What does it do?
So let me start with what I would say is the good news. Like, to the extent that you think this is not that big of a deal, and some of my colleagues are arguing that, including the Speaker of the House and some of my colleagues in the Senate who are looking at it now, they would say that this is narrowly focused on just the Department of Education, Title VI of the Civil Rights Act. So all they can do is apply this and this definition of anti-Semitism to the activities and the organizations on campuses and students on campuses, that if they do any of the things that are problematic, that would be viewed as targeting our Jewish friends and doing it in a certain way, that this list of examples, they would say that's anti-Semitic, that could all be factored in to what the remedies are through the Civil Rights Act to go after university dollars and the organizations and groups on campus. But everything flows from that. Once we, Congress, accept the premise that we're going to put the government into thinking thoughts, views that are backing up whatever your illegal actions are. Now, again, do you trust any bureaucrat at the Department of Education for them to maybe work with law enforcement community if they need to go carry out the Civil Rights Act, to then expand it to this laundry list of examples? Again, say what you and I promise, I want to speak for you, horrified at what some people are saying and doing about our friends in Israel, siding with the Palestinians. It's nonsense. But frankly, this tiny little group of radicals You don't go remake your constitutional order to address this tiny little group of radicals. You take this tiny little group of radicals, you kick them in the ass, you get them off your campus, other than if they follow the rules to get, engage in their crazy rhetoric. But what you don't do is have the thought police come in and tell you that what you say can make you then suddenly be whatever the government deems is wrong. Once you've done that, you've given power to the people you should never give power to.
Chip, these animals that take to the streets every couple years, whether it's Antifa or Black Lives Matter, now they're all pretending to be Hamas lovers or whatever. It's all the same group of dirty commie dorks, as you well know. You and I have talked about this. They're funded, they're organized, they're paid to do what they do, which is cause civil unrest in our country. So why can't we have a GOP that attacks the source of that? Who's financing it? Who's organizing it? I don't care if some English major on the quad gets pepper sprayed. In fact, I think it's hilarious, Chip, but that's not the actual source of our issues. We have people, including international people in international, other countries like China, funding and organizing this crap. Does anyone in the GOP want to go after that?
No, it's worse than that, Jesse. Many in the GOP want to actually help fund it by giving more money to the United Nations.
Of course.
Or by giving money, for example, last week to go to Hamas and to fund the refugees and the Palestinians to come over to our country. The Republican leadership is so ass backwards, you can't possibly put it into words. They're generally speaking too stupid to breathe, much less vote, much less lead the Republican Party. So here's the deal. We have to change that. We have to change that. We started to last year. We made some serious changes. We actually forced some constraint on spending and caps. We passed the non-amnesty actual border security bill. We actually passed the national defense bill that undid a lot of the woke crap. We were cooking with peanut oil, and we got a little off track for a variety of reasons. Now they've reverted to the mean, right, which is stupid. They want to put bills on the floor for political purposes so they can go win. They need to get power so they can do all the good things that they never do when they have power. So there's a large block of us that are saying, hell no, we're done. We're going to keep proving the emperor has no clothes. We're going to lay it bare. We're going to vote against their crap. We're going to expose it to the people, and we're winning. It's just maybe not fast enough yet. I said it to our friend Glenn Beck earlier this morning. You're sitting on the Titanic, the iceberg's in front of us. We're turning the wheel. It ain't turning fast enough because we got people on our own team pulling the wheel in the other direction. So we've got to get in with enough force to yank that wheel over so we can save the country.
I haven't let Afghanistan go. And I know we bring it up, every few weeks on the show we talk about it. I haven't let it go. And you should not let it go. And I cannot emphasize this enough, how much what we did in Afghanistan is helping further along the destruction of the American military. Guys are getting out because of it. Guys are choosing not to join because of it. GWAT veterans are talking their children out of joining because of it. It's really, really friggin' bad. Things are bad inside the military, and Amber Smith knows about it. In fact, she wrote a book about it. Joining me now, Amber Smith, veteran and now author of the book Unfit to Fight, which I would highly recommend. Amber, I know you know them because I know them. In fact, we know many of the same ones. I can't count how many GWAT veteran friends of mine are done. They're done, and their kids are done. Hey, Jesse, my sons aren't joining. My daughters aren't joining. They watched it, and they're sickened.
Yeah, and it's a demographic. The veteran demographic is something that the Pentagon has counted on for years to sort of be this family business. Like if you served in the military, your kids are so much more likely to serve in the military. But yeah, I realized that in the research for my book that veterans are done contributing. They've given enough, and they're saying, I'm not giving up my kids to go deal with these horrific foreign policy disasters that are being made out of Washington, D.C. And I'm glad to hear that you are not giving up on Afghanistan and talking about it, because that's exactly what the Biden administration is counting on, is the American people to forget about what happened. And during the evacuation, we were all watching it unfold in real time and wondering what the administration is doing with actually flat out denying the reality of what was going on the ground. You had John Kirby, a White House national security spokesperson, from the podium talking about how proud the administration was of the evacuation and that they didn't even see the chaos. And so we're thinking, what is going on with how they are attempting to push this narrative? But if you look at the new report about the investigations weren't actually telling the whole truth and giving the big picture about what was happening in terms of it being a bigger, complex attacks than the picture that they initially painted for everyone. And it's because they're attempting to influence history. They want the evacuation from Afghanistan to not be remembered for it in its reality, but how the narrative that they painted from the White House podium. And it's working, as you see, like there's very little media attention reporting this most recent report that talks about how the attack was likely much larger and more complex than they originally talked about, and that maybe working with the Taliban and handing over perimeter security of the airport to the Taliban wasn't the best idea and ended up with 13 Americans killed.
Amber, you and I have talked about this both on the air and privately about the lack of accountability from a leadership, from a flag officer standpoint, meaning, World War II, anyone who knows anything about it, you look at a conflict like that, there's a general getting fired or resigning in disgrace every other week. There's an admiral getting fired. Guys getting court-martialed for not even really doing much wrong, just screwing something up. And after Afghanistan, 20 years of failure, the only guy that lost his job was a lieutenant colonel who called for accountability. Where's the honor in the flag officer corps anymore? What happened to these people?
Where's the honor and where's the integrity? That's something that is preached. Yeah. It is preached all day long to anyone that serves in the military is about integrity. And sadly, like leadership starts at the top, right? We're seeing these flag officers testify on the Hill, and straight up, they don't even try to hide it anymore. They've got talking points, they've got their narrative, they know what their goal is. Their goal isn't to win a war, it's to get more funding to continue the war. So they go up on Capitol Hill, they tell them anything they want to hear, which is the exact opposite of reality. We saw this in Afghanistan, where they talked about how the Afghan army could stand on its own 2 feet. They didn't need the US military support. They were conducting the missions, which anybody that was there knows, is that the US military was leading every mission. They would grab some Afghan interpreter or different Afghan army soldier to come with them so they could call it an Afghan-led mission. So it's crazy that the Pentagon has spiraled this out of control in terms of leadership trying to circle the wagon, and it's only gotten worse. After Vietnam, you saw this sort of shift of leadership accountability, and they didn't want to have that sort of stain on the Department of Defense as a whole. So instead of holding specific leaders accountable, they are like, let's circle the wagons. Nobody's going to get in trouble. Maybe you'll get moved into a different job position, but we don't want to deal with what they view as a PR disaster. So culture in the military has only gotten worse, and you have these leaders who fail up and have all become yes men, and it has turned into this disastrous culture as it's immersed itself into foreign policy and how the military plays a part in that. And it's, sadly, the soldier on the ground is the one who has to suffer the consequences of no accountability.
Amber, I'm really, really glad you wrote the book, Unfit to Fight, because I'm glad there are people out there sounding the alarm about how bad the rot is, because people don't understand how bad the rot is because we're not in some major war right now. Frankly, we're not in any real war right now. But the rot the normal person doesn't see now is going to rise to the surface real fast when things get kinetic here at some point, and they always do. It's going to get really bad when we get tested under fire.
It is, and we're already seeing the effects of it. We are seeing a recruitment crisis that we have not seen since the all-volunteer force after the Vietnam War. Even worse is the retention crisis. You're seeing officers who are turning down battalion command at the lieutenant colonel level, and people who are just, riding out their time till they can finish up their contracts and get out of the military. The morale inside the military right now, we talk to military people every day, and it is the stories that you hear is just that it continues to get worse. The COVID vaccine mandates that kicked out over 8,000 service members who wanted to be there, who wanted to serve in the military and serve their country, and were probably the leaders that the military needs right now. And instead, the military kicked them out. You see the diversity, equity, and inclusion being the priority as it exists today, instead of being mission focused. You see standards being lowered so they can meet these quotas or targets or goals that they want to make a more diverse military. And in doing so, it's pushing this focus on uniqueness and individuality of the military instead of cohesion and trust and building the team, which we all know is absolutely necessary to have a successful military. And all of that combined has created a weaker military. And like you said, World War III is knocking on our doorstep. Pretty much it seems like something new every other week. We need a strong military right now. And instead we have them focusing on all of these distractions that is taking away from accomplishing the mission and training that prepares us to be able to be successful with that mission.
You know what kind of bums me out? I guess maybe it should make me feel better because the misery is shared, but it bums me out. It's that it's not just us who suffers from all these things, all the endless problems from this filthy, dirty commie stuff. It's all the West, all the great countries I love, all the countries that built Western civilization. They're all going through it right now. UK's going through it right now. Joining me now, former Miss Britain. How about that for fancy? And of course, she's been on the show before, contributor to Stein Online, Leilani Dowding. Leilani, illegal immigration. A bunch of people who don't belong in our country are now in our country, and they're raping women, and they're murdering people, and they're robbing things, and they're destroying the healthcare system and the education system and everything else. I'm just glad that kind of thing's not happening where you live.
Yeah, no, yeah, it is. It's really bad. It's got really bad over here. Just yesterday, there was actually an illegal immigrant, an Eritrean, who had raped a child and he was convicted, but he wasn't deported because that would hurt his mental health. And so we've got this problem. We've got these guys coming over in dinghies, and it's not women and kids, like they try and say they are. They say they're asylum seekers, but, they've left their women and their children in these war-torn countries that they're supposed to have come from. Then you have people coming from Albania. There's no war in Albania, so, why are they coming over? And the government position in the UK should be that they're meant to stop in the first place that's safe. So that would be France. But here you are, you can see in the picture, these guys are crossing the channel in these inflatable dinghies, paying absolute fortunes to the traffickers or the gangs that are going to help them get across. And then when they land, they get put up in housing. Now, for the past few months, it's been hotels. Well, the past year or two, it's been hotels, really nice hotels, but the type that people have their weddings at. People's weddings got cancelled, their bookings got cancelled because they had to house these illegals. And then now, the UK government is combining with the Serco, who's paid by the taxpayer, to now house these people in private housing. So they're offering landlords a 5-year contract to house these illegals. They'll pay for the repairs and the maintenance, which if you're a landlord is a massive expense. It's one of the biggest expenses. And then they don't also have to pay any commission. So Serco will kind of take your house and get it looked after for the next 5 years with illegals. And obviously that's taking inventory from the British people. It's taking inventory from the migrants who have come here illegally and paid to get their visas and to work and contribute to society. So that's where we are now in England. And it's so frustrating for everybody.
Here on the ground here in America, at least where I live in Texas, everyone I talk to, and I mean every single person, left, right, and middle, they're mad about the illegals. They don't like the illegals. They don't like that the border's open. They don't like that the border's open. They complain about the border being open. And yet here in America, the border remains open, almost as if the people who run the country don't give a crap about the will of the people at all. Is that what it's like over there too?
Absolutely. We have a conservative government in power. They're supposed to be conservative. They promise they're going to deport these illegals, and it doesn't happen. The headlines today is that one illegal got deported to Rwanda. It's laughable. These are supposed to be a conservative government, and they're not doing anything that they promised about sorting this situation out. And, we're happy to send our soldiers all over the place and protect other people's borders. We cannot even protect our own own borders at home. There's 500 of these guys coming over weekend. In every weekend, there's 500 or so of these people, and we're a small, tiny country. We don't have the space to put these people up. Where are they supposed to go? Now it's going to take inventory from, the British citizens by using homes that should be going to, the people living and working here.
Where are these people, how are they getting there? Because here in America, what I find fascinating is this is almost exclusively a Mexican drug cartel thing. You got to go check in with the drug cartels. You got to pay them your money or sign up to be a friggin' slave. And we won't even go into all the nastiness when it comes there. And then they will make sure you come into America and they'll get you placed and then abuse you horribly. But there aren't any Mexican cartels over there in the UK. Who's bringing them?
They're coming over to France. There's all sorts of drug traffickers and human traffickers, Albanians. A lot of these people are from Iraq, Afghanistan, Pakistan, India. You seem to be getting, as well, you seem to also be having a lot of Middle Eastern people and Africans and Chinese crossing through your borders as well. So again, like us, they're not in the first, safe country. They're crossing through the borders. Our guys are coming through on the illegals. They're coming through on these, inflatable dinghies that you see. But I've seen your illegals coming through on speedboats, into San Diego. It's like they've upped the ante, and they're driving into the beach on speedboats. So we've got these guys coming over, and I feel like it is by design. It's by design. It can't be anything else. It's happening, throughout the West, throughout Europe, throughout America. And if they wanted to stop it, they absolutely could stop it. So the only conclusion I can draw is actually they don't want to stop it. There's so much money involved. There's so much money involved housing these people, feeding these people. I'm sure the government are giving out contracts to their buddies. You've got Serco taking all this money in. You've got investors but trying to buy up, huge properties to start these multi-occupancy homes. So there's a lot of money involved. And then also you can go on to say, I don't want to sound like a conspiracy theorist or anything like they like to say, but, eventually they're going to make people feel so unsafe with all the crime that it brings with the robberies and the rapes that people are going to beg for a digital ID. It's like problem, reaction, solution. Let's create this big problem. Let's just allow all these people to come into our country, use taxpayers' money to take care of them. And then, the solution, let's just make sure every single person, including all the law-abiding people of Britain, have a digital ID or surveillance or have their faces scanned walking into shops, etc., etc.
Language really matters. And that sucks, doesn't it? It shouldn't matter. You should just be able to just speak whatever words come out of you. But language matters to the communists, therefore it must matter to us. They speak with the intention of deceiving, because you can't exactly broadcast your plans to burn down everything everyone loves. That's not a great sell, so you lie. And they lie all the time with every single issue. They've carefully selected their words so we can never use their words. But we do, don't we? I'm sure I'm guilty of it too. You find their language, you use it, but we have to stop doing that. Joining me now, Rebecca Vello, opinion editor at Wrong Speak Publishing. Rebecca, you have a piece up titled, Why We Must Reject the Language of the Left. Dump it on me. Why?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have to reject it in its entirety. And the reason we have to do that is because when you control the language, when you can manipulate the language, you can manipulate our thought. Because when we think, we're using language. And when you manipulate our thoughts, in turn, you manipulate our behavior, because our thoughts determine our behavior. And so this is a way for them to very innocuously control us. And so that's why we have to reject the pronouns and all of that entirely. We have to reject it.
Why haven't we rejected it, Rebecca? Because traditionally the right, in my 42 years on this planet, has been terrible at this. We'll take whatever they say and we'll feel like Well, I want to meet them halfway. So why did we get so far along and shift the Overton window this much? Why didn't we catch on?
Because we are the ones that are having our empathy weaponized against us. You constantly hear that the left is just too good. They're just too good for themselves. They can't help it. They're so empathetic. They're so kind. They care for everybody. But in reality, they don't. The real issue here is that we are the ones who are having our empathy weaponized against us. And we want to compromise, and we want to meet them halfway. Oh, well, this guy's really nice and he thinks he's a woman, so I'll just go ahead and use the pronoun she. He says he's going to vote for Trump, so he's a nice guy. I'll go ahead and do that for him. And that's how they worm their way in. They get you to agree to a little bit of it, and then before you know it, your thoughts have been manipulated. So now some men, the nice men, can become women, and then before you know it, you've adopted all of their agenda. And so that's why we need to be careful with having too much of our tolerance used against us.
Hugh, if anyone wants a great example of exactly what Rebecca's just talking about, I'm going to play you a little clip of Jamal Bowman. Now, Jamal Bowman is a dirty street communist from way back. He got elected to Congress. He'll be there for 15 minutes, and then they're going to primary him out because he's too much trouble. But Jamal Bowman hates this country with the fire of 1,000 suns. That's all he wants is to burn it down. But he's doing this sit-down interview, and he's asked about these illegals crapping on the country. You want to talk about language, using language to appeal to your empathy, just like Rebecca just said? Watch him.
Exactly.
Should the United States bring in people from Gaza?
Well, we are a land of immigrants, and we are a land of asylum seekers. And anyone escaping persecution and oppression and violence, the United States has always been an open home to those people. So whether they're coming from Palestine, Honduras, Guatemala, El Salvador, Mexico, Haiti, they're coming here to contribute to our economy, which 99.9% of them are. We've always been a place to open our doors to immigrants coming here. So yeah, fully support that. And also fully support amnesty for the migrants who have been here for quite some time.
Rebecca, I thought the police sirens in the background were just a chef's kiss on top of that.
Well, and this is a really great example of it. So if you ask people, do you want illegal immigrants coming into our country? Of course, they're going to say no. But do you want hardworking migrants to come into this country? And of course, the answer is yes. So you can see how you can just change the framing. You can just switch the wording up, and you're going to get two different opinions. You can open people up to something that they normally wouldn't be open to by just shifting the language. And when you do that enough, and you do that in as many places as you can, in media, on the social platforms, in the colleges and so forth, you're getting hit from it everywhere possible. And so eventually you start thinking, well, these are migrants. I'm going to call them migrants. I'm not going to call them illegal immigrants. And so your thoughts change, and then therefore your behavior and your attitudes towards them are going to change. And this is how they can shift public opinion very easily.